My name is Slava, so I'm a founder of Relevant Protocols, and what we're working on is building protocols for curation of content online, for curation of digital content. There's like a name for that, so that's called curation markets generally, but there's still not a lot of kind of formal definition of what curation markets are and how to make a curation market. So I want to talk about how one would construct a curation market, some problems with existing designs, kind of like early mistakes that people have made, and how we at Relevant are fixing these mistakes through the use of a Sybil-resistant reputation system. All right, so why are we building, what's the need for building curation markets? So the basic idea is that distribution of content online right now is driven by advertising markets. Right, so advertising markets, in advertising markets, users are the asset, right? Their user attention is being sold to advertisers by kind of these like big platforms. And what happens, and we kind of can observe this now, is that there's very few incentives to distribute content that's actually valuable to users, right? So there may be incentives to distribute content that people click on, right? That gets a lot of clicks, but that does not necessarily correlate to value to end users, right? So if we want to solve this problem, we're living in a capitalist environment, so what we want to do is actually maybe we can make a market that has content as the underlying asset, and where the user is the demand side, right? So that's the basic motivation. So how do we begin to think about creating a market? So we need these people that buy and sell stuff, and that's kind of correlates to demand and supply. Although the caveat is there's a special kind of market that's a prediction market, right? So in a prediction market, the buy and sell gets it's like a little bit different from demand and supply. So the demand aspect is actually speculation in a prediction market. You can argue that there is some demand and kind of bootstrap. You need to bootstrap the prediction market. You need to create a market maker. But once you do that, people are just speculating and basically betting. And you can do that if you have strong fundamentals, right? So the prediction market has like a really, really strong fundamental, at least in the ideal scenario, where that's like a real event occurring. So you're betting on like whether a real event will happen or not, and then it's like pretty easy to decide whether a real event actually happens or not, right? That's like a very strong, easy thing more or less easy thing to decide, as opposed to like a value of a company, right? Like that's a little bit harder, you need to do research and so on. So that's like the basic stuff we need to think about when building a market. So what's an example of a curation market? So a curation market is sort of like a combination of like stock market and a prediction market. So an example, like a simple example to think about in my mind, I think, it's like this decentralized job recruiter platform. So you have employers that post a bounty to fill an open position. You have users, protocol users that are like able to stake on candidates that they think are qualified, so they can like research candidates. Maybe they can create like ways to test candidates, basically figure out who the qualifying candidates are. So that's like kind of like this crowdsourcing aspect. And then employer gets a recommendation. So it's like a list of people that are, these like top stake candidates. So these are, predicted to be the most qualifying candidates. And then you do an interview process. So that's like the final step. The market is resolved through this like interview process. So there's like somebody, hopefully the employer knows how to actually tell whether a candidate is qualified or not, and they make a final decision. They hire someone. If they hire a candidate, then the bounty gets distributed to all the people that staked on that candidate. So that's kind of how that works. So let's think about how to do that with digital content. So we have this like, our demand side, right, is like people, users, communities, desiring high quality content, information that's relevant to like a specific topic maybe, or value system, so it's like a well-defined context. And then the supply stuff is like maybe specialists that know a lot about this particular subject. Maybe it's a recommendation AI that focuses on this like particular field. And then the resolution, right, so that's kind of the hard part here. Like, how do we actually determine the value of information? How do we determine the value? Who decides that? Right, because these are all like kind of like these amorphous groups of people. So the early attempts at doing this were like, well, okay, we can build this like market maker which lets people more or less bet on content. So I can buy shares in like a link. And then if it's successful, right, I get some payout, I get some return. So the early kind of the early proposition is like, well, maybe we don't need these like fundamental thing. We can just like be like the content that got the most people like betting on it is probably the best content, right? We're just gonna say that. But there's a big problem with that, right? That kind of just like breaks the market and renders it totally useless, because when you take away the fundamentals in the market, all you have left is speculation, right? And that's, when you have that, that's like not a useful market fundamentally. Because, right, for that very same reason, because it's not tied to any fundamental value. Right, the whole point of the market is that it reflects some sort of fundamental value. It makes it easier to like observe it, transact with it, and so on and so on. If that's missing, our whole market is useless, right? All you get is speculation. If you want the price to go up, you just pump the price. If you want it to go down, you dump. So it's like, you can't derive useful information out of that. If we go back to our example of this this recruiter problem, this recruiter platform, right? That's as if though employers got lazy. They're like, fuck this, we don't actually need to interview. It's like usually we see that the top staking candidate is the one that's the best qualifying one. Why don't we forget the interview process, save some money, we just hire whoever the top staking candidate is. Well, that just like destroys the incentive model, because now it's not a matter of finding the most qualifying candidate. It's just like it's a matter of finding the most popular candidate, right? Or just like convincing everyone, doing a bunch of marketing and convincing everyone to back this one candidate so that they get to the top of the list and they get the job. And that's right. So that's like independent of how of the actual qualifications of that person. So this is the same reason why a lot of the TCR designs don't work. Same reason why there's like problems like assassination markets and prediction markets, right? So like the assassination market is when I bet that person A, I bet, like $10 million that person A is not going to get assassinated. Well, that's equivalent to like a $10 million bounty to assassinate that person. So that's an instance of where, right, the market starts impacting the underlying asset versus the other way around. So the takeaway from that is that, right, staking and prediction is not the same as curation. We don't want those things to be the same thing. We want those things to be distinct, right? So like, just like prediction is independent from the real world outcome in prediction markets, staking in a curation market should be independent from like the actual curation of like the actual, ranking of like what it is we decide is actually valuable. So the general framework that I'd like to propose is this like 3-stage process where we start out with some input, some data, a feed, like a real-time feed. We filter that feed by prediction, so staking. And then we have this final resolution stage where we have some curators, right? And I'll talk about how we kind of define who those curators are. So we have some curators, some decision-making governance process of actually deciding which one of these predictions is actually valuable, is actually correct, right? And deserves a payout, a reward. Just a brief case study of like an early curation market. So the biggest one, it's probably like the biggest decentralized app out there, Steemit. So here, curation is like the same thing that I've been kind of describing, where you can bet on a post, you're staking. And then, if the post gets highly ranked, you're getting a payout, but the issue is that the ranking is determined by stake, by the amount of money people staked on this post. Wrong way. So that's a self-fulfilling prediction market, right? So it's the prediction becomes the outcome, and like the ranking has no clear meaning. And it is kind of observable, right? If you go to Steemit, it's kind of like this crazy mess. There's like other issues going on, but then there's no real like reasoning behind the rankings on Steemit. So it could be like anything from market size to preferences of wealthy whales, some sort of extrinsic incentives, like all of that stuff can impact the rankings. And there's no clear curation criteria. So what we're doing is we've kind of designed this system for this resolution layer. It's based on a reputation system that's based on PageRank, the PageRank algorithm. So basically, people are able to stake on content as a prediction that it will be rated highly within a specific community of users, right? So, and that community has a reputation system, and they're basically able to together to vote on content to decide on a particular ranking, rank or like value of a particular piece of content. So in our case, right, it's just like these real-time feeds are coming in, a bunch of stuff people are posting, sharing on wherever, Twitter or Medium, or like looking at all the different news outlets, right? And then we're like taking all this information, it's getting ordered by stake. So it could be recommendation algorithms staking on content. So maybe there's an AI that goes out and finds 20 top blockchain articles each day and recommends them to all the blockchain communities by staking like a few tokens on each one. Maybe there's an advertiser that's like, okay, I have this like awesome post I want to share about my product. I'm going to stake a bunch, I'm going to stake 100 tokens on that. Hopefully, like people that are in relevant communities will notice this. Or human curators that are like, okay, I know that this is going to be relevant to these specific communities I'm active on. I'm going to stake on them as a bet. Maybe I'll earn some income. And then the final kind of determination is made by users that have high reputation within a community. So their upvotes, all their votes are weighed by their reputation, and that's how the final rankings are determined. So just a note on Sybil-resistant reputation, right? So a lot of designs that we see in the crypto world are using tokens for any sort of decision-making, governance, because it's a Sybil-resistant mechanism to an extent. Okay, voting with money offers a degree of Sybil resistance, right? It makes Sybil attacks expensive. But the trade-off is, and it's a huge trade-off, right? First you get plutocracy, which is, right, now we're only taking into account opinions and preferences of rich users, which may not always be the best, right? The best or the most expert opinions. And the other trade-off we're making is the lack of context, right? So sometimes we really want a specific group of people with a specific type of experience or specific type of training to make decisions, right? Like we want legal advice from lawyers that have a legal, that have their law degree, not from just like rich Twitter users on Twitter. So that kind of, you can't get that with voting with tokens. You can't just like prevent somebody rich from coming in and being like, I know what I'm talking about, and let me tell you my opinion. So the personalized PageRank system is another tool we can use. It offers Sybil-resistant properties and has its own set of trade-offs. The main one being that there are some trust assumptions that we will have to make if we want to compute global reputation. By global, I mean just for like a set of, for like a community or for like a group of people. And there's like some other things like it's harder to compute on, on something like Ethereum and so on. But here's how it works. Here's some like intuition behind how it works and how this like trust assumption works. And specifically how we're constructing this system within Relevant. So in Relevant, each community has its own reputation system. So here's an example of one community, right? This is like a network graph of a single community. So each community has a set of trusted users, right? So they're kind of like admins or moderators in a traditional sense. And you can require, right? Communities can require different kind of different levels of identity verification. Ideally, these are real identities. They have some accountability, and so on. So these users are assumed to be trustworthy. And basically, we construct a reputation system that stems from these users. So in this graph, all the dots are all the other users in this community. And they can be pseudonymous, right? They don't have to have real identities. They can just be like Ethereum, public keys, or whatever it is. And then each edge is an upvote of a comment. So, right, so if one of the admins upvotes this guy's comment, this guy's reputation goes up, right? So the reputation kind of propagates from the admins to the rest of the users. Now this guy has a reputation when he upvotes this particular piece of content, this post, like the ranking of the post goes up. So within this within this graph, you have both users and content. And it's for regular users, there is this level of Sybil resistance where, because we have this personalization vector, it doesn't matter. Like if this guy creates a bunch of Sybil nodes and they all content, they all upvote this link. It's the same thing as just like this one person upvoting this link. Doesn't make any difference. The only people that can make attacks are the admins, and there can be all sorts of kind of ways to monitor. There's fewer of them, so we can monitor them easier and kind of track what they're doing. And then there's ways to vote them out of office or blacklist users and so on. So the way we, just like some intuition behind bootstrapping and governance for the system is that, you know, if I'm starting a community, right, I'm probably going to make myself an admin. Maybe I'll invite some people I trust to be admins also. Kind of bootstrap the system this way. Once it grows, right, the reputation system kind of gets propagated to all the different users. We can then start using these reputation-weighted voting to elect new admins or remove abusive admins or people that become inactive. So this kind of creates a self-reinforcing system where, you know, if you bootstrap it in the right way, it kind of propagates itself, even if like the original admins leave, like somebody else becomes an admin, and so on. But the other nice thing about it is there's no clear distinction, right, between an admin and a user with high reputation. The user with high reputation basically has the same weight, the same impact. So what we accomplish is this kind of like crowdsourced discovery layer, right, by using staking. Then we narrow the funnel a little bit, and we have this, it's still this like open, decentralized kind of crowdsourced expertise layer, because again, this it's like creates this hierarchy using reputation, where any user can still kind of like easily transition between these states from just like staking to earning a bunch of reputation, earning a little bit more reputation. So there's like this continuum between, the different roles any given user can take, which is a really nice system and a really cool thing. So just some takeaways. Staking is great signaling mechanism, great prediction mechanism, but should not be used for final decision making. We should, figure out a way how to use expertise and reputation for final decision making, for resolving markets, for enforcing curation criteria. Tokens are not the only Sybil resistant mechanism. We can use personalized PageRank. And that's a great kind of token engineering primitive, especially when it's combined with tokens and interacting with cryptocurrencies. And that's all. So we're going to be launching our beta app. So the app is actually it's similar to Reddit with these like extra components where it's this reputation, kind of like community-specific reputation. It's not transferable. So the community is kind of like a subreddit, so you can earn reputation within this community, and you can like stake tokens on post as a prediction of how valuable they are to a given community. So we're launching that early next month, March 5th. So you can sign up for the waitlist to get an invite on relevant.community. And yeah, thank you. Let me know if you have any quick questions. Do we have time for questions? Yeah.
Completely naive, and I just want to, does this thing work? Yeah, sorry. Just want to ask a simple question that probably everyone else in this room knows the answer to. But is staking via tokens, to me, sounds like stock investing, which is regulated by the SEC. And I'm just curious if tokenizing allows us to all get around like the rules of stock, who's allowed to invest in stock. Now, I know there's been the Jobs Act that has made it easier for stock investment at a lower wealth rate. But I was just curious if tokens aren't even regulated within that system.
In our specific case, So I think the first thing to look at is like a prediction market. I'm not sure. There are questions about whether prediction markets are regulated by the SEC or not, or like I think it's a different kind of subset of. So it's not quite stocks because it's more of this like prediction. It's more of a gambling game. That kind of stuff is actually abstracted away. So you don't have like an individual token. You have these like temporary share of this given token, but it resolves really quickly after like, in our case, after 3 days, it just like, that's the cutoff that looks at the ranking and it either gives you a reward or you're not. In our case, you're also not directly investing your money, so you can't lose your money. You basically lock up this global token as a bet on this specific thing, and then you get your token back, and maybe you get some rewards. And the fee, the money that you're paying is coming out of inflation, right? So the fee that you're actually paying is this like whatever the inflation rate is, so like 10% inflation. Everyone that uses the protocol pays that together, and that's where the rewards are coming from. So it's kind of this way where it's like gambling light, sort of like safe, where you can't lose your house, right, by like doing this thing.